And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. And this is Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, your number one African Caribbean online radio. Well, every Saturday we come to this global village we call Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Under the village tree in Africa, we discuss issues of great importance and relevance by the continent we love so much. It is the continent of the future. It has been the continent of the past. It's been dormant for far too long, for about 500 years, when there was that kind of disruption towards our progress. But you know what? All is not lost where Africa is concerned. But whenever we come here to discuss issues of great importance where Africa is concerned, it means we love Africa. There's nothing wrong with Africa, as people might want us to believe. There's nothing absolutely wrong with Africa. Like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, Africa is not poor. It's Africans who are poor. And this is just also to say that we are making progress as we go along. There are so many things, there are so many obstacles that may come our way, but see, with time, we'll be able to overcome it. Again, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, the black man is capable of making mistakes and correcting them. And he was absolutely right. Today we have a special guest all the way in my in-laws country. If I say in-laws, I'll come to explain it. The connection between Ghana and Zimbabwe is right there for us to see. And we have a very special guest. And before we go on, I have my other co-host in the person of Mr. John Benjamin Daniels, who is in Accra, Ghana. JB, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
That's right.
Saturdays are days. So
That's right. Thank you. Yes. Before we start this conversation, we'll be waiting for Dr. Impindu, Francis Impindu, to join us. And we'll get to where we want to get to this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you may be. In the first place, I would like my guest, or our guest, to introduce herself to you out there. The floor is yours. Makita.
Thank you so much. I am happy to be here on Love Bay. Thank you for the invitation to talk about an issue that I'm so passionate about. My name is Makita Chikami Magarezano. I am a lawyer and I've practiced for 7 years as a prosecutor here in Zimbabwe. And it is during that time as a prosecutor when I started noticing the loopholes in our criminal justice system. So my job ended up becoming a little bit monotonous, between court and my office. I was craving for some field work, and I was like, oh, why don't I incorporate my desire of assisting people who are coming out of our correctional facilities? And that's when I resigned just a few years ago. And in the process of establishing a non-governmental organization which focuses on assisting prison leavers with their reintegration into prison and out of prison. And right now we are concentrated on my province, Masvingo province, which is in the southern part of Zimbabwe.
Awesome introduction. And I would like to commend you for whatever you are doing, because I've been following the progress with respect to what you're doing. And if we get so many people getting involved with respect to shaping Africa, where Africa is supposed to be, Africa will be a better place. For starters, I read an article, and this is what I gathered summarily. It says, for the prison is not an institution indigenous to Africa. Rather, like so many elements of African bureaucracy today, it is a holdover from colonial times, a European import designed to isolate and punish political opponents, exercise racial superiority, and administer capital and corporal punishment. Is there any sense of truth in this?
I am glad you started with this question because it's 100% correct. I was just studying on the history of prisons, and only to discover that prisons are actually a new phenomenon for most countries in the world, actually, with the first prisons having been established, the modern day prisons having been established around the late 18th century and the early 19th century. So it is then the white people, when they decided to invade Africa, they came with that concept into Africa. Africans had their own way of dispute resolution, especially here in Zimbabwe. We had the local courts, the chief's courts. It would be the chief with the chief's delegation, and the victim would be involved, the perpetrator would be involved, and it was a restorative practice or a restorative setup. So Africans would sit around in a round table and then deliberate the offense, and the chief or the delegation would decide on the possible sentence or punishment, and usually it would be compensatory in nature. So you'd find out even for murder, for rape, the severe the offense, the higher the compensation would be. So you would be, if it's murder, maybe it would be 15 keto, and we know the value of keto, 15 keto, 20 keto. This is not easy. So it'll, and so that would leave the victim's family compensated, and it wouldn't take the accused from his family and put him in lockdown. So this new system of prisons doesn't really favor either the accused or the victim's family, because it takes away from both. You see, the accused would have taken away from the victim whatever offense, and then we are uprooting the accused and putting him in lockdown where he is non-productive, you see, and it's taking away a well-bodied person who's probably an intellectual and putting him in a prison. And then when he comes out, we put a label on him and we say, no, you're a criminal, you have a criminal record, and you're not incapacitated. We shove him into the corner and say that's time out. So that was not our African way of doing things. The African way of doing things was filled with familial and communal restoration. We would move forward to both the accused and the victim after the chief court would end up, they would still move together. But with prisons, it's like, we can't be talking together, because it's instilling hatred, grudges in people. So yeah, very good statement there, 100% correct.
Yeah, what you just stated with respect to how we handled cases back then traditionally was that if anybody within the community committed an offense, they were summoned to the chief's court. And I'm telling you, the questions, I have visited one before, and whilst I was on vacation in Ghana, and it was very, very interesting. The questions that they sort of put out there, sometimes you might see that like they went to law school and they got just decisions, which was more acceptable within the community and stuff like that. But then things changed whilst we were on that trajectory with respect to the invasion and all those kind of stuff that you alluded to. So yeah, traditionally we handled it better than when we were invaded. Thank you for that. JB, do you have a question for Makita, please?
Yeah. Madam has traced the history of penal system in Africa during the colonial days before the days before the colonial masters came to Africa, and he did vividly well. So what happened? What changed? I know other people say that the system that Europeans brought was just to make the Africans second-rate citizens, because then they lock you up, deny you of all the basic amenities, and gradually, in some cases, they allow you to. I mean, like in the case of the slaves, they allow you to wither in your cell. But the African traditional system somehow
JB, could you hold on just
allows the two contesting parties.
Hold on just a second, please. It seems somebody is knocking something. If the person can, yeah, somebody is knocking. There's some construction or something in the background. So, if that person will be able to suspend it for us.
So let me conclude now. Inform them.
All right. Sure.
So, Madam, why don't we go back to our old system, and we are taking this system that were bequeathed to us by the colonial masters, which we don't have the resources to implement. And if you go to our prisons, the situation is so horrible. If you can expatiate on this one, I attend to the people.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. It's not an overnight thing. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time for us to actually not go back, but put in place a model which reflects what we used to do, because not everything within the modern prison setup is bad, so we need to merge what was of our our cultural dispute resolution and the modern criminal justice system, and then merge it together, and then be able to implement a very good criminal justice system. I'm very proud to say my country, Zimbabwe, is actually between an act and a bill. And the bill has some interesting provisions, and most of those, highlights. Some of the highlights are, they'll be considered. We will be considering restrictive practices for non-violent offenses, and also we'll be considering community-based courts. So as for Zimbabwe, I'm actually happy and proud that we are in the right direction. So if other African countries could actually follow suit, in a very few years' time, we would have a better criminal justice system. Countries like Norway, 20 years ago, actually started, refurbishing their criminal justice system. And to date, Norway, after 20 years, is, one of those countries with a very good criminal justice system. So it will take time, but it's doable.
Any follow-up, JB?
Yeah. I noticed that in Ghana we have the alternative dispute resolution system, which is part of the judicial system in Ghana, and it's working nicely, because then contending parties are asked to use the ADR system, which is virtually, like you rightly said, based on the former system. System that were used by our ancestors, and it's working nicely. Even though most people don't understand it, but I believe with much education it will work. But here is a situation where we have a lot of retrial prisoners or pre-trial prisoners, I may say, and a lot of people whose cases have not been adjudicated, have not been judged, but they go to the court for the first appearance, and the judge will ensure that they should be put in the prison for a later date. And look at these prisons, the horrible situation. So the person comes out of the prison and is more seriously a dangerous criminal than before he was sentenced. So when I was reading the literature, I noticed that AU and the United Nations have come in and they are really doing a lot to help African countries improve upon their penal system. What do you suggest that Africans should do to improve with all these financial difficulties? What can we do? Don't you rather think that we should go slow on the penal system that we inherited from our colonial masters, and rather encourage more African countries to strengthen their alternative dispute resolution mechanisms instead of being with this new system that we cannot manage well? Any comments from you, madam?
All right. I'm trying hard to listen to what you are saying, sir, because the audio is a bit it's not clear. But yeah, I'll try to respond to that. What Africans can do in order to help develop a desirable criminal justice system is basically to be less judgmental and to be less critical of those who would have been involved in the criminal justice system. Sometimes taking the time to understand, the underlying causes of what would have caused the offense. It's very damaging to us as a society to just hear a case on the news and to instinctively make a decision that, this person is bad and this person is evil, because that connotation now we are planting it into that accused person. So he will end up with knowing. So in such a case, when he comes out, he already knows that he is not accepted in society. So when he is coming out, he's telling himself, what's the point of going out and meeting people who don't like me and being nice to them? They're not going to give me food. They're not going to give me accommodation. They're not going to accept me. So he's going to come out feeling like an outcast. He will be an outcast. So, when you say that, he comes out a dangerous criminal, it is because of that mentality, that then makes him a dangerous criminal, because we are not giving him a second chance. Now, I always say, at home, in our familial setups, if you want to discipline your child, the best way would be, okay, my son, I've realized what you have done is wrong. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You are absolutely wrong, but let me walk with you and teach you the better or best ways of behaving like a man or like a human being. So he then notices that, okay, I have done wrong, but at the same time, mom loves me. She's not chasing me out of the home, because a serious punishment which leaves out the empathy and love and compassion has that effect on people. It will harden them and they will come out serious criminals, and will not be able to turn them back, So in a way, it is society unknowingly, which is actually contributing to the high rates of crime by their treatment, or mistreatment of the, of people who would have been in prison. And you did mention, something about someone going to court and then their trial not being heard. That's a very serious, injustice. And most constitutions, will have that specific provision on the right of an accused person to have a fair trial. And a fair trial includes time years prosecution of your case. So if your case is not prosecuted in time, it's best it falls off the roll. But I have seen in other countries, here in Zimbabwe, again, I will say, our system actually makes it easy for the court to dismiss the case, which is constantly appearing on the roll, but not going anywhere. So the magistrate will say, okay, I'm placing this matter of remand until the police have their house in order. But I've noticed in Nigeria, people are actually in detention pre-trial for more than 10 years. That's an atrocity. That's an injustice. And we need to make noise against such things, and we need to push our policymakers to change such conditions.
Awesome. Thank you. My follow-up question, or let me put it this way: do you think we as Africans should develop our own way of handling this? Because Mr. Daniels alluded to the fact that the AU and the United Nations, because all these institutions, to me personally, I have my personal opinions about them. But I think, this is my question to you. Do you think we need some, as Africans, from any point of view, do you think we need some prison sort of, we have to develop some prison governance kind of system that can address the pre-trial, trial, detention, and then moving forward, and then rehabilitation? Is in North America, for instance, you go to jail once, like in the United States. Let me put it in the United States, in the context of the United States. We have a program here where an author, a young man, was imprisoned. He was incarcerated for stealing, even though he said he didn't steal it, $20.
Yes.
$20, and he was sentenced to 50 years in jail.
Wow.
50 years in jail.
Yeah.
But for the indulgence of a former governor, it was reduced to 29 years. And then, he was subsequently released, right? Now, if it were, he cannot go out there to work because it's a blight on that person. But with respect to Africa, once you come out of it, one, there's no rehabilitation as to get you back into society and perform as a willing and an abiding member of society. What do you think, if you have to put everything into context, into perspective, do you think we need a sort of a prison governance system that would encompass the whole of Africa, starting from whichever institution, or even if it's within countries?
All right. Okay. To have a model system collectively for all of Africa, I think it'll be a little bit difficult because you know the challenges with ratification. Some countries will be slow. Some countries will be quick to understand and sign. But what I think is, it's best maybe if human rights lawyers in the affected specific countries would really come up and advocate against such atrocities, because they are, $20 for 29 years,
Mm-hmm.
that's shocking, Yes. That is so shocking. Like, I got stuck there. Like, okay,
I saw that.
What was the judge even thinking? Like, even if you say there were other, factors, or circumstantial issues around, I don't really think, that was just. So, what would be great would be, if the affected countries, the human rights lawyers in those affected countries, they push for their governments to, change the policies and change the laws. Again, I'm going to commend Zimbabwe on this. I've also discovered that Zimbabwe is one of those few countries with an attractive criminal justice reform. A lot of people may not agree, but in terms of, our prison setup, of course, we have financial challenges and infrastructural challenges, but rehabilitation is one of those things we are focused on. We focus so much on vocational training. There are counseling aspects. Even some correctional officers are now trained to be counselors, within the prison setup. The prison environment, in terms of educating prisoners and changing their mindsets, is actually, much commendable, though it would need a couple of improvements. The problem now is the reintegration, which I have discovered is actually no African country, besides Kenya and South Africa, maybe, no African country has policies in place for the reintegration of ex-prisoners, when they're coming back into the society. And that is a great anomaly. That is a great injustice, because, take, for instance, you spend 5 years in prison, you're coming back to what? You probably lost your job, you probably lost your wife, the community doesn't like you. There's so much stigma attached to your name because of the offense that you have created, and nobody's advocating for you to come back to society. So what these people would usually do is that they become ghosts. I always call it like a ghost-like fashion.
That's right.
A ghost-like fashion. They are in the country, they are in our communities, but they're not gonna mingle with us in an open way, And funny enough, I always say, people who are coming out of prisons, most of them are smart. If you notice that people who actually go to prisons are actually very smart, and some of these people, they actually run, the economies and the communities in the way they want, but people don't realize it, because, we separate ourselves from them. So instead of using his good skills and talent and education, maybe as an IT technician, he is going to use that expertise to commit further crimes and recruit other people, because we are not accepting him. So reintegration techniques and practices and policies must be in place, in order for us as a society, for safety, really, because checking them out isn't in our favor.
Yes, it is very true. Like in North America, for instance, once you go there and you come out, people just I did time, man. I did time. I went to prison. It's something that they don't care. But in Africa, you are sort of as isolated, and I think that doesn't augur well for us, folks. We are in conversation with our special guest, Makita. I don't know. She's the founder and CEO of Alleviate Justice Involved Persons Reentry Program in Zimbabwe. And folks, she's doing an amazing work. Continuing, recently, was it this week or I think last week, the Zimbabwean government granted amnesty to about 4,000, if the number is right, 4,000 prisoners. How did it come about? And I think on this particular case, I'll tip my hat to the Zimbabwean government and the work that you've done. And what the second part of it is, what is your organization going to do to help get these brothers and sisters back into society to contribute to the development of Zimbabwe and Africa as a whole?
Okay, all right. In regards with amnesty, the recent presidential amnesty, I have 2 points to state. The first point is that I was actually opposed to the amnesty. Why? Because 4,000 people who are not ready to come back into society, and the whole nation which is not ready to receive, this population in society, I was like, this is a disaster, because it completely shakes the whole country. As we speak, every day in our newspaper headlines is this person has gone back to prison, that person has gone back to prison. Just now, my husband has sent me another newspaper headline. I think it says 11 people released during the amnesty have been charged with murder and robbery, So I was really opposed, because I felt that, the government is shortchanging people. They need to first prepare both sides. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And we don't even have the backing or the footing as yet. So now that they have already released the 4,000, I am one of the very few people who are focused on re-entry here in Zimbabwe. And I can assure you that is in our efforts seem like tiny drops in the ocean. They'll probably go unnoticed, but maybe for the individuals who are receiving our support, them and their families will appreciate. So in my province, Masvingo province, 5 ladies were released through the Amnesty, and so far I have met with 3 of them. And reintegration again is expensive, and it is a long process. And one so far seems to be working with us, because there's this mindset that when you step forward to assist somebody who's not used to getting such kind of assistance, they will be like, okay, why are you here? Are there any hidden motives? So they will not readily receive you. They will only respond positively when they see a close friend of theirs who would have probably gone through, our channels, recovering well, and then that's when they say, okay, now I want to be part and parcel of the process. So we really, because of also financial constraints, we have very few beneficiaries that we can help at a time. That is one of the challenges. But I'll be sincere with this. It's a very new phenomenon for my, my townmates. But because of social media, I am trying to educate them, and people are actually coming around, getting donations, financial support. Sometimes some people are actually offering, available rooms, maybe in their garage. I've got my storage area is empty, so you can bring one of your people to come and stay. And we're getting food. Like this morning, I went and I got a bag of maize. So with the community support, it's actually a little bit easier. But like you said when we started this program, if many people were to embark on this mission, it would have great and noticeable, changes.
Thank you. JB, any comment on that question?
Yeah, I noticed from Madam's delivery that non-governmental organizations have a very important duty to perform in this area of the African penal system. Because if you look at the paucity of resources that are available to our governments, it will take a long time for the prison reforms to be undertaken. But there are a lot of rich people in our communities, in our countries. And if the NGOs lead this march, I think they would rather do education and mobilization of people and resources to support these people who are pardoned by the governments. We pardon prisoners in all our countries, yes. And we see NGOs going to the prisons, looking into other people's cases, and you see that, well, the man has been there for a long time, not even heard a case in court, but he has been there for 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, what have you. All these people. But my question is, if you know you cannot manage your prison systems well, why don't you rather use community service by way of punishment, or use the arbitration or the alternative dispute resolution system to bring, instead of using the full all of the court system, where you put the people in the prison, put them on very serious, unhygienic and dangerous condition, where they go and rather learn new skills in crime, instead of rather tweaking your system in such a way that instead of taking every case to prison, you rather give community service. And so I believe that the NGOs in Africa should rather link up with the various NGOs in the various African countries, get a strong body, and work through the OAU so that you force our governments to rather dwell more on the alternative dispute resolution system, going back to the way our ancestors used to resolve conflicts, whereby the compensation of the person who was rather inflicted harm will benefit. But otherwise, this system is rather churning out more criminals. I'm very sorry to say. So yes. I believe that your delivery is an eye-opener, but the NGOs, we demand more from the NGOs, because they are the people who can really make the difference. Any comment on that?
You're absolutely correct. The current prison system as it stands, like I said earlier on, is actually damaging the community, because it takes away from the perpetrator's family, it takes away from their victim's family, it takes away from the community, it takes away from the country, the economy and everything. So, but we also have to highlight some positives, but generally it is actually, I think, about 75% to 80%, my own analysis, on the bad side. And it to such an extent that even the Americans have actually realized that prisons are bad and they're advocating against it. So it's actually a worldwide revolution. It is just not, the African war. It is really, everyone is actually up in arms, but only the lawmakers and policymakers are a bit slow to respond in changing the laws, but it is now visible. Prison reform is definitely, it's an evolving process. Like I stated earlier on, that prisons are actually new, having been implemented in the late 18th century and early 19th century. That's when the Western countries thought, okay, maybe this is a much favorable way to punish people after medieval forms of punishment. They used to behead each other. You could lose an eye for stealing something like a pen, or a hand, or they would drown you. They were much more atrocious. So they thought when they embarked on the modern prison system, they were actually doing something that was, favorable, that was going to impact greatly on society. So it was moving from beheadings and cutting fingers and toes as a way of punishment to prison. So it seemed like a just system, you see. But then over time now, the realization that, oh no, this isn't a very good system at all, is now there. But the problem now with us Africans is that, we have been brainwashed, to a certain extent, where we have forgot, some people don't even realize that restorative practices are actually African. They are actually advocating for this, but it's our way of doing things. And then Africans are still hell-bent on, let that person go to prison, let that person stay in prison. Another point you mentioned is that why don't we do away with, prisons? It's not that easy, because prisons, we can't entirely do without them, because even before prisons there were jails, holding cells, so it is very crucial for containing somebody who has not gone through the necessary assistance that he needs in order to become a better human being. And remember, sometimes some of the assistance would take long. Maybe somebody has mental challenges, or they will need psychiatric assistance. So of course, those ones who go to a mental institution, but then prisons are important for the safety of the community before somebody is fully rehabilitated. So we can't entirely do without them. We need to reform them. I mentioned Norway earlier on. Norway actually has prisons that resemble colleges. So prison reform should actually, we should do away. Maybe it will need money and resources and infrastructure development. Maybe that's why our governments are a little bit slow on that, because it requires a lot. But the model prison that we should have would be, a prison that's not overcrowded. You have your own room. You basically feel like a human, not like animals that are being shoved into some, dungeon. So prison reformation is very important. And then another aspect which you mentioned is that, can we not let the community just deal with the people who would have wronged society, maybe do their own prisons? Well, we might have done it way back before the introduction of the police and now the modern court. But it's now difficult to entirely go back and do away with the police, because humans are now evolving. Humans are very smart now. We'll be endangering ourselves. Already corruption, is a problem with, in our courts, in our governments, wherever you are. So imagine people who are just left ungoverned to impose punishment or sentences on themselves. That would not be ideal. Even the chief, the local courts, they actually have, a certain type of cases that they will actually deal with, by themselves. Like, murder nowadays, it's not safe to say, okay, chief, you can now, preside over this case. Because of the modern setup, that will not be ideal. So we need to merge, the modern way of doing things and our traditional way, and come up with an exemplary model. That is the advice that I can give, because leaving people ungoverned to, in dispute resolutions, especially in the criminal arena, is highly dangerous and very much unsafe.
Awesome. Folks, if you are listening to us on Love Be Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, and if you are watching us live on LinkedIn, StreamYard, YouTube, Facebook, subscribe to us. Facebook channels, all the channels are, attributed to this radio station, because we come here every Saturday to discuss issues of great importance and relevance where Africa is concerned. And we have our special guest today. It's Makita Agarizano, founder, CEO, Alleviate Justice, Involved Persons Re-Entry in Zimbabwe. Makita, I'm very passionate about women's issues. This radio station, we are trying as much as possible to make it like a woman-centered radio station, because most of our programs are women-centered anyways. Well, I read another article. The article said, with respect to women, that Africa lies in the middle of the global average of women prisoners as a percentage of the total prison population, between 1% and 6% of African prison populations being comprised of women, even though the continental average is lower than elsewhere in the world. National averages vary from rates as high as 4.5% in North Africa, 5% in West, that's Cape Verde and Southern Africa, Botswana, 3.3% in Central Africa, that's Angola, 6.3% in East Africa, Mozambique, to 1.7% in North Africa, Sudan, 1% West, Burkina Faso, and Central Africa, Sao Tome and Principe, and 1.2% East Africa, Malawi, and 1.8% in Southern Africa, Namibia. The numbers are not that great, but still, I think it's significant. What is your comment on that, please?
You know what? Women in conflict with the law is a very sensitive topic. And you know, if you research further, you'd realize that most women are actually in prison for survival, or what we sometimes call poverty crimes. You know, because of economic hardships, there are no jobs. You know, most of our governments are not doing much to, you know, assist people. We don't have grants, you know. So women end up stealing in order to feed or fend for their families. So imagine you have 3 kids and maybe your husband dies, and you know those kids will have to go to school, they need to eat, you know, they need clothes, you know. In fact, one of our beneficiaries who was released during this amnesty, she's known to be an avid thief. Yes, thief, like, you know. So I had to ask her, and I was like, Holly, everyone is saying you know, it's going to take Jesus to reform you. What do you say? They say you steal. And she said, Auntie, that is so true. But to be honest with you, I have nobody to give me food. And because of my history, you know, with crime, no one is willing to hire me. So the only way I can put food on my table is that if I steal, and only hoping not to get caught. So locking up women for survival crimes is actually a great atrocity and a disfavor to society, because you're basically uprooting the pillar of the family. You are leaving the kids unsupervised at home, and those kids are going to be exposed. You know, when there's no mother in the family, kids become, you know, vulnerable. They become more vulnerable. They become exposed to so many injustices. You know, some will be exposed to rape, some will be exposed to, you know, abuse, you know, the you know, like the forced labor, child labor, you know, cases of teen pregnancy, you know, early sexual practices. So uprooting a woman from the family really leaves, you know, it's very much undesirable. And then when the woman eventually lands in prison, you know, some of them, they take their young kids with them. Maybe she's nursing, you know, with a young baby, and we know how we all know of the harsh conditions in our prisons. So you have that little toddler or baby exposed, you know, to such an environment. So you know, restrictive practices will actually be in favor of women. You know, if you steal, then we study your personal circumstances, and then we try to assist you, you know, without sending you to prison. And it's actually a lot more easier to assist women, you know, or prevent women from going to jail than it is with men, you know, for that one reason, that women are mostly doing crime for survival crime. Not all crime, but a great deal of it is for their survival.
Thank you. Yeri, any comment? Because I have a very big question for Makita before we leave. But
so, Madam, with your experience with the African penal system, what will you advise the OAU, the AU, and the various African countries to do to reform our prison system?
All right. First of all, our governments must, you know, prioritize policy changes in respect of our prison system. The AU should influence that in each country. People must be taught, awareness campaigns really to change the mindsets of people, because whatever shift that you are going to implement, even if it's a law, if the mindset of the majority remains primitive or hostile, you are not going to see much results. So much of the work needs to be, in the society. It has to start within the communities. It has to start with me. It has to start with you, Mr. Daniels. You have to understand that prison is not a solution. And you also have to understand that prison is not a bad place. And the overall, another thing that the AU can do is to actually demystify the prison system, because prison systems, like I always say, they're like a private school. It doesn't help the community for prisons to be detached from the community members, because that's when people will start formulating different connotations and having their own perceptions of what prison is like. Taking it, they should take into regards the security measures, but at the same time, prisons must actually participate, or be fully engaging with the community. Here in my country, we have a few prisoners who have choirs or bands, and they come in the community and then they sing. It helps, the people on the outside to relate better to the people who are inside, but that's not fully, it's not at a large scale, and so demystifying prisons and making them relatable to the community, so that people don't give that overall evil look or evil atmosphere towards our prisons. And another thing, so that was the prison reform, right? Yeah, I think the other idea just disappeared. So basically, it's changing the mindset of the community first, through awareness campaigns, and then effecting that prison departments are not foreign to the people in the community. Those two things could actually assist, I believe,
in restoring. Yeah. One thing that I think politicians or people who have been elected into offices forget about is that every one of us, including themselves, are potential prisoners.
Yeah.
Every one of us are potential prisoners. So once they get into power, they don't care. You said something that resonates a lot with me with respect to women who are incarcerated. I think our governments have failed us very well. See, sometimes you might say there's not a lot of financial resources and stuff like that. But then women in Africa are the backbone of our economies. If a woman has got to struggle to go and steal to feed the family, right? Whereas the president, the prime minister, the ministers are having their kids going to foreign schools, and all these things are bound up to them. You see, we have failed women. There's no doubt about it. We have to speak truth to power.
Yes.
Because women have been relegated to the background. Even in cabinet positions, they give women affairs and stuff like that. There's discrimination even there. But then we are looking at the march towards women independence and women power, girl power. A case in point, one of my best and one of the most favorite politicians of all time is Mia Mottley in Barbados. Barbados is the only country in the world that has the prime minister a woman, the president a woman. So you know what? This is just to say that Barbados is a prime example But let's bring it back to Africa. There's got to be reforms. If a woman should be sexually abused, domestically abused, domestically violenced, for the person to be able to feed the children, and they can, widows like that, and they have to steal, then we have failed.
Yeah.
I would propose that there shouldn't be any, when it comes to women prisoners, there's got to be something more to it than that. Because you know what? At the end of the day, if you raise a woman, you raise a whole continent, not a nation.
Yeah.
And before we go, if you are a listener out there, Makita, how can they reach you and then give you the support? Because you know what? We'll bring you back because we haven't finished with this. It's got to be dialogue. There's got to be the conversation. The conversation has got to be there.
Yeah.
We've kept quiet for far too long. That's what this radio station is all about. We come out and we discuss issues of great importance, great relevance, where we are concerned. And this topic is very, very important. The floor is yours, please. Go ahead, please.
What you're saying is very true. Our criminal justice reformation is one of those topics which are hardly talked about, and yet it has a major influence, on the economy and how people, interrelate in our communities. So we need to talk about this issue. We need to, impart information towards people so that we can impact our communities for the relevant changes, so that we can also assist and push our governments in changing our laws and policies. I do actually believe that we're not going to be like this. Things are going to actually change. It's going to be slow, it's going to be gradual, but change is inevitable.
Amen.
Yes. I am in Zimbabwe. I am in Masvingo. I am reachable on my cell phone number and email. I'll start with my email, right?
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
My email is makitac@yahoo.com. That's MAKAITAC@yahoo.com. And then my cell phone number, which is also on WhatsApp, is that is +263 777 355 194. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can search for my name, Makita Chikami Magarizano, on LinkedIn, and you can send a message in the inbox. And you can also have a broad overview of the work that we have been doing. So thank you so much for affording me this opportunity. I'm excited. I'm happy. And yeah, Mr. Daniels, it was lovely meeting you.
Yeah, this is not as a hello, a goodbye. We are going to bring you back because the panel haven't, assembled yet. Dr. Francis Impindo is on his way, driving from the United States to Canada. So we've got a lot more to speak about, and we are so happy and honored for you to have appeared with your schedule. We hope to bring you back. And in the meantime, thank you once again, folks. If you are listening to us on Love the Afrobeat Music Talk Radio and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you know what? Come back again next week at the same time on Love the Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, your #1 African Caribbean online radio, where we give you our history, our geography, our traditions, our cultures, where it matters, because Africa is dear to our hearts. That's why we come here every Saturday to sit under the village tree and then talk about what is relevant to us. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you again in 7 days. Bye-bye.
Bye.